Good morning. Y'all are hoping I'm going to smash something again, aren't you? I could use it. 2 Peter 1:3, we've been talking about it. His divine power has granted to us all things that pertain to life and godliness through the knowledge of him who called us to his own glory and excellence. And then we're going to skip to verse 5 here, if we can pull that up. For this reason, make every effort to supplement your faith with virtue, virtue with knowledge, knowledge with self-control, self-control with steadfastness, steadfastness with godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. Okay, so the first thing to notice in 1 Peter 1:3 is we do this through God's power. It says his divine power has granted to us. So that means we don't do this on our own strength. We don't obtain any of this, especially self-control in our own strength. So if you had that on your New Year's resolutions list, just cross that off right now. Self-control? No. Move it over to your prayer list, because that's where it belongs. And then that verse says this concerns both the physical and the spiritual life. It says life and godliness. Okay, so this affects us in every way. So how do we access this divine power that pertains to life and godliness? Well, we access it through getting to know him who calls us to his own glory and excellence. That is, who calls us to imitate him. And notice it says in verse 5, make every effort. Where is that? Make every effort, not a half-hearted attempt, every effort to supplement your faith. Okay, I love supplements. I do. I have a whole bag full of them here. You know why I love supplements? Because I used to feel terrible. Until the doctor figured out that I needed a supplement, several of them, in fact. See, I was living without the supplements my body needed, but I was not living well. I had lived with so much stress as a law student, as a family law attorney, as the oldest of 8 kids that helped to raise all my younger siblings when my mom died of cancer at age 45. Having 6 miscarriages myself. So I needed a number of nutritional supplements. My body was stressed out, and I needed supplements to restore my health. As a matter of fact, I'll never forget my oldest daughter's friend. I love this kid. He's hilarious. But he was over at my house, and I was taking my morning supplements. So I'm pulling them out here. I've got my cruciferous sprouts, and I've got my turmeric. It's great for all that inflammation. I had my vitamin D. Where's my vitamin D? It's the little bottle, isn't it? I had my vitamin D over here. Yeah. And then I had my, collagen. Gotta have that for the wrinkles, right? The fish oil. And I had my biotin for the skin and nails. And I had my holy basil. That's for the stress, ladies. That's an awesome one. And then, the Maltese. Gummies, of course. Who wants to swallow those big nasty things, right? So I had all my supplements. And every time I was pulling one out, this kid's eyes got bigger and bigger and bigger. So he so respectfully says, Miss Danielle, should you be popping all those pills? I cracked up. Well, I mean, that was a really courageous kid to bring that up in the first place, right? So I reassured him no, these are not prescription pills. Yeah, that didn't help. He's like, but hey, physically, if we need medication, if we need vitamins, we take them, right? So what should our spiritual supplements be? Well, Peter goes on to tell us faith. So in verse 5, he says, for this very reason, make every effort to supplement your faith. Okay, so we got to start with faith here. We start by passing on our faith, making sure our children have their own. They can't live off of ours. See, we do that by living out our faith. I've told you before, kids can sniff out a hypocrite anywhere. Do our actions match our words? Hey, in our faith, do we have something our kids want in the first place? Then comes virtue. Virtue, it's an old-fashioned word. Sometimes we say good character now. Notice we don't teach good character. and therefore our children are Christians. That's works-based, that's legalism, that's what Jesus condemned the Pharisees for. That's completely backwards, see. The good character comes from the faith. It comes from as a result of imitating Jesus, the Son of God. You know, my kids like to, when they were little, to walk in their dad's footprints when the sand is really thick at the beach. That's how we're to follow Jesus. When we have faith, then, what supplement do we add? Well, next we add knowledge. That's what we're here for, right? That's what we're doing now. We're in the learning section of the morning. We are seeking to know first more about our Creator and then about His creation. And then, of course, the next thing we add to the supplements is the big one, self-control that we're talking about. And that's what we're focusing on, but let's talk about that in a minute. Let's see what happens next. So once we have self-control, we add steadfastness. That means we won't be moved. Consistent all the time. Consistent self-control with godliness, that is the imitation of Christ. So imitators of Christ with godliness there. And that's going to lead us to brotherly affection. And then finally, the end goal that we all want to get to, moms, that's love. We want to love well. But we have trouble loving well if we don't back up and take the first steps toward it. So let's back up to self-control now. So you ask your tween to get off her screen device. They ask, why? You ask your preschooler not to interrupt you. Why? Why can't I have the candy? Why can't I spend the night at the poorly supervised friend's house? Why can't I do this? How many of you say in your heart, yes, because you will end up a slave to your passions and whims? No, that's what we really mean, though, when we come up with those mom lines, right? I included self-control in my toddler devotional that I wrote, Playtime with Jesus, amongst very basic theology because it's that important. There's a little finger play, a song in there that says, I have self-control because God's Spirit lives in me. You know, we had Christmas just now, and how many of you have like an Advent calendar to count down the days? So I had this little house, and it's got these little boxes, and I have a 4-year-old, and I filled them with, you know, fun little things, coins and little rubbery things that get broken and thrown away the next day, and little candies and things like that. And I placed it before her, and I said, Melody, look this tells us how many days to Christmas. She took one look at it and broke down, fell on the floor, and cried because it was so long to Christmas. And now it's over. Self-control. It is the ancient virtue that we used to call temperance. As a matter of fact, Plato identified it as one of the 5 virtues necessary for successful living. So this isn't even just a biblical concept. This is a concept that everybody has recognized for thousands of years. We must have self-control to have a happy life, including those 5 virtues were courage, justice, piety, and wisdom, very lofty things. Self-control is right there with them. Now, we use that word temperance differently now, but it's the same thing. It's an ancient problem. Comfort food. Road rage, I don't know how ancient that is, but you know, we never know with the horses and stuff. Substance abuse, those trashy movies and trashy novels, and cheating just a little, and cutting corners, and skimming a little money off the top, not bothering to listen or pay attention, especially to our kids and our husbands, guys. You know that? You get that kind of, you forgot they were talking? Yeah. Yeah, I have a 15-year-old that calls me on that. Mom, you're not listening, are you? Some of the issues that our kids have at school, you know, when we're lazy at work, these are all a root issue of lack of self-control. You know, we do it in our marriages too. It's exercising self-control when we keep our mouths shut and let our husbands parent without our expert advice, you know. It's been lovely on the other side of that to see my daughter in college call her dad for advice on issues where he excelled in our parenting team because I let him be the dad and just close my mouth so many times. I love what Meaningful Mama said. If you've never read her blog, I love her blog. But she says, as we try and navigate raising our kids in a world that glorifies and abuses freedom and rebellion, we need to teach them what real freedom means. We do have the choice to sin or obey, but we need to teach about the freedom that comes as we submit to God's ways. He sets his ideals for self-control so to make our lives better. It doesn't mean a perfect or easy life by any means, but it does mean we can break free from the bondage of sin and guilt and natural consequences when self-control is not in play. So what's the opposite of self-control? I was trying to think about that, and I thought it's probably self-indulgence. But the opposite of self-control is not pleasure. Let's make that clear. God is not against pleasure. He created it. He called it good. It's a great thing, but it's our sin nature that's internally disordered us. So our good and normal and healthy passions are out of order ever since the fall of man. See, we end up loving the creation more than we do the creator. We love food, we love sex, we love entertainment, we love leisure more than the God whose idea they were in the first place. I mean, the first and greatest commandment, Jesus says, is love the Lord your God with all your heart. You know, St. Augustine of Hippo stated in his classic book, City of God, but if the Creator is truly loved, that is, if he himself is loved and not another thing in his stead, he cannot be evilly or wrongly loved. For love itself is to be ordinately, that means first loved, because we do well to love that which, when we love it, makes us live well and virtuously. Let me say that again. We do well to love that which, when we love it, makes us live well and virtuously. So it seems to me, this is St. Augustine, it's a brief but true definition of virtue to say it's the order of love. And on this account, in the Canticles, the bride of Christ, the city of God, sings, "Order love within me." That should be our prayer, moms. Oh, Lord, order love within me. Make the things that I want and that I desire in the right order so that I love you first and my family next and all this other stuff below that. That's the root of self-control. And guess what self-control results in? Peace. It also results in peace. Proverbs 25:28 is a great verse for your kids to know, but it's for you. It says, "A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls." See, a lack of self-control leaves us completely defenseless. And that's the real question here, Mom. Why would we leave our children defenseless? Remember this, when you start to feel bad about disciplining your children, okay? Correctly disciplining your children, not losing your temper, but they've had a bad day, you've had a bad day, but it doesn't matter, because not correcting, not teaching your children that they must have self-control is leaving them defenseless. Toddlers have very little self-control because they have very little self-awareness. You know, I went to breakfast yesterday with my brother. We had some things that we needed to take care of, and so he had his kids, I had my kids. And he has a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. And we're chatting, and the boys are starting to get restless, and Wyatt, the 1-year-old, reaches over and grabs his brother's head, his 3-year-old brother's head, and kind of gently bonks it. And they both smile at each other. It was the sweetest little faces, the sweetest, cutest moment. And then Brantley reaches back, the 3-year-old, and gently bumps Wyatt in the head. But you guys know where this is going, right? You know exactly where this is going. 3 more bumps and everybody's crying. Because toddlers have no self-awareness. They don't know when to stop. So how do we teach them these things? What are some practical ideas? That's what everybody's asking for. Okay, so what do we do with toddlers? We do things that take a long time. We plant seeds, watch them grow. We do puzzles with them, a little more challenging than they can do by themselves, and you do it with them. You don't let your children interrupt you for non-essential things because they have to learn to wait. I found some fabulous self-regulation games for kids that really have a problem with this, that teach self-control at parentingscience.com. So here's a really easy one. You know how to play red light, green light, right? You say red light, you stop, green light, they go. You do that for a few minutes, and then you switch it. When they say red light, when you say red light, they go, and you say green light, they stop. And you can do that with freeze dancing. You know, after you dance when the music plays and freeze when it stops, switch it. Fast music and slow dancing, switch those around. Those things are proven to really help kids that have a problem with it. Because out of control toddlers are going to become what? Out of control teenagers, aren't they? Young children with poor self-regulation skills tend to make less academic progress. That's all over the studies, the McClellan studies. Throughout the years, they're more likely to experience anxiety, depression, aggressive behavior problems. In the long run, the studies say children with poor self-control are at higher risk for poor health outcomes like obesity and drug dependency. They're more likely to commit crimes, and they're less likely to make a successful living. A man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. So I taught my kids the term self-government. I said, listen, when they got past the toddler years and they're in the school years, I said, if you can govern yourself, I don't have to. If you fail to govern yourself, then I'm going to govern you. You know, think of the example of the Joseph story in Genesis, when Joseph is kidnapped from his home, stolen, sold into slavery, as a slave, put in charge of a guy named Potiphar's house, an official. And he's had such a tough life so far. He's finally doing better, and then Potiphar's wife tries to seduce him. Let me ask you, could you count on your 17-year-old to stand up to that temptation? To not be wallowing in self-pity in that situation, indulging whatever pleasure he could find or she could find? Part of talking about self-control with your teens is talking about sex. And what we'll not do is that one and done birds and bees conversation, guys. It won't work to tell your kids, don't have sex until you're married, and leave it at that. Sex and self-control are an ongoing conversation with your teens where you ask a lot of questions. And let them ask questions where you are willing to give honest answers. Let them, every pop song on the radio right now and half the movies and TVs will give you lots of fuel for discussion questions. Yes, you know what I'm talking about. So, what do you think the artist means when she says blah, blah, blah? Do you agree with that? Why? Why not? And here's the really great question to ask your teen. Ask your teen what bad parenting looks like. Hold your breath. Your teen knows exactly what bad parenting looks like because he or she knows her own and his own weaknesses. I love what Josh Gibbs says. He's an educator. Bad parenting is simply the kind of parenting which refuses to recognize the teenage nature. The longer a teen ruminates on what poor government of a teen looks like, the better he understands effective government of a teenager, which is to say he develops self-awareness, that crucial precursor to self-control. So ask them what a bad parent looks like, and ask them what a good parent looks like. That awakens that self-awareness in them. And self-control is that supplement we're looking for. What about if my kids are little? I can't ask them that question. Well, there's a lot of books and movies out there with some self-control themes to talk about. So I put up a list of a few here that you probably have laying around. Miss Nelson is missing, Lily's Purple Purse, and My Mouth is a Volcano. That's talking pretty directly about self-control. If you have one of those kids, you need that book. But there are self-control themes in the movie Frozen, in Kung Fu Panda, in Wreck-It Ralph, Little Women, Anne of Green Gables, The Karate Kid, The Farewell. You see those themes? Talk about them. Where did you see self-control in that movie? You know, what did you think about what the action that character chose? And of course, reward self-control when you see it. Lavishly reward self-control. Pray for it diligently in your kids and practice it yourself. So, Mom, how will you build your defenses? That's your question to take home. How will you build your defenses? How will you build your defenses with self-control? You add to knowledge self-control and get to the end love, which is where we all want to be as moms. Thank you.